Merry Christmas, slot car fans! My name's Princess Rob and welcome to Swift Slots. Now, if you've been watching any of my recent mail call videos, you may well have seen my awesome Princess Peach motorbike. If you recall, I said I was in a toy shop with my wife and I found this motorbike and I could not put it down. And my wife said to me, if you like it that much, I'll buy it for you for your birthday present. And I said, I would absolutely love it for my birthday present. So I showed it to you on my mail call video and I was a little bit concerned because I thought some of you might not think it's all that cool. I think it's really cool. But to my amazement, most of the comments in that video said, we can't wait to see your Princess Peach motorbike. So here we are, Christmas Day. We're going to do exactly that. We're going to turn this Princess Peach motorbike toy into a slot car. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get you on my bench and I'm going to show you the ins and outs of this toy, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to use to put inside it to turn it into a slot car. It won't take long because there's not a lot to it. So let's get you on my bench. Let's have a look at this bike in a little bit more closer detail, and then we'll go to the bench and we'll turn it into a slot car. And here she is, my awesome Princess Peach on her motorbike. Now this is really, really cool. There's something about it that I absolutely love. I don't know if it's the visor over her eyes or just how well she's nicely painted or the colours or what, but I just think it's so cool. So let's take her out the packet and I'll show you in closer detail. And there we are. Just so cool. And maybe it's just me, I don't know. Maybe something's happening to me, but I just think that is really, really epic. So, there's the Princess Peach, all ready to adorn her motorbike. And there's her motorbike. Look at that. There we are. Now that is actually a pull back and go. So if we pull back the mechanism and let it go, it runs. There we go. So it actually runs on these grey wheels. So we got quite a lot of real estate to play with there on those back axles. We've got a lot of good traction and everything else. So you can see there's a little tiny amount of area here which we could probably get a motor in. Now, there's not a lot of room inside this bike and I've already had a good look at it and it's all friction welded together, so I'm going to have a trouble getting this apart. So what I'm going to have to do is I have to chop out the bottom of this plate and try and insert a very small motor and gear inside the belly of this bike. Now, a very small motor and gear, you say? Well, what could that be from? Well, when I was going around a car boot sale, or a flea market I believe the Americans call them, I found this Spider-Man Carrera Go 143rd scale car. Now it's missing a few bits I think, and it's also missing its guide, but I immediately saw it in the bucket and I thought, I know exactly what I could use that for one day. I could use it for the extremely small motor and gears that it comes with. So I think we got half a chance being able to get the internals of this Carrera Go with the back axle, the gear and the motor into this Princess Peach motorbike. It might be a bit of a squeeze, but I think we can get the motor down here and we can actually use this back axle and these rubber tyres to actually get this motorbike running. And the front guide could simply just be a hole drilled into this front tyre with a post coming up through it and a standard guide on that front wheel. Obviously the front wheel's not going to turn, but you know, it is what it is. But the back wheel would be free to turn. Now there is a chance that I might have to put some stabilisers at the back of this bike because I would like it to perform a little bit. Not like the wheelbarrow where it kind of struggles to get around the track. I would like this to go around the track with a modicum of speed. That would be pretty cool. So that's what we've got. We've got a motorbike. We're going to have to get it keyhole surgery through the bottom of it. And we've got all the micro running gear from this 143rd scale Carrera Go Spider-Man car. So let's hit the bench with those parts and let's see if we can turn this bike into a working slot bike. Okay, so the first thing I think we need to do is just get this drivetrain out of this chassis and also take away this piece of plastic on the bottom of this bike just to see what we've got going on. Okay, so that's the first round of digging complete, and what have we learnt? Well, we've learnt that I can't fit the motor in sideways, but I can fit the motor in that way. So what else we've learned is I think this whole project is going to be viable. So if I put the gear silhouetting on the face of that wheel, roughly in the middle, and then put my motor in, I think there's half a chance that we're going to get that motor into that bike. Now we may have to dig around on the inside of the bodywork a little bit to try and clearance some of the motor. Difficult to tell at this moment. But also what we'll see is there's a whole new layer of plastic in there which needs to come out. I was rather hoping that when I took away this plate I would actually see gears, but obviously we can't. So I've got to get in there into the old dentist's chair and go in there with some keyhole surgery and rip all this lot out by hook or by crook. That lot's got to come out. And as I said to you before, I think this bike is friction welded all the way around. So my only access is through here, which means I'm not going to have the ability to probably get this axle out. So what I'll probably have to do is cut two very careful slits up the side of this grey plastic here and try and lift the axle out as one, because in my experience these really high quality toys have really high quality fitments between the axle and the wheel. I've tried to pull apart some Mattel cars in the past and they use like barbs, really tight fitting barbs, so when they go together in manufacture they don't really come apart as a child's toy, which is exactly what you would want in a child's toy. You don't want these parts coming off. So I'm pretty sure that I'm never going to get those wheels off without getting the whole axle out first. So like I say, I have to dig out all this lot, possibly cut some slots down the side here, get that axle out as one, and then we'll take it from there. So I'll come back to you once we've hogged out all of this in a fairly brutal way. Okay, so it is Christmas Day and I'm sure you don't want to watch brutal surgery on a model because some of you have still got your Christmas dinners to eat. So I've saved you the stress of watching me brutally hack this model apart and digging it all out. But with a little bit of chamfering on the end bell of that motor and also quite a bit of hogging out of that internal belly there, I have actually managed to create just about enough space, I believe, to get that axle in. Now there's probably a little tiny bit more digging that I've got to do. I'm just starting to break out just here and here, and I'm wondering if I could just nibble those corners out if I had to, and I can always paint the back of the motor silver or a bit of red to match the bike, and I think we'll be alright at the top here as I'm digging through just around. It's coming out around about here. I might be able to just break through if I have to and then paint the back of the motor silver, but I'm hoping I don't have to go that far. But as you can see, good progress is being made, and I'm pretty sure that we're going to be able to get that to all work. I'm almost there now to within a couple of mil. So let's do a little bit more digging out of here and I'll come back to you and I'll show you the motor well within the confines of this body. Okay, less haste, more thought. I've had a close look at this motor and there's a very small gap there of just under a millimetre, I would say, but the bearing doesn't start for about another half a millimetre inside that case. So I think I could probably get that pinion back onto the motor by about 1.5 mil. And when I'm this close to having it fitting, 1.5 mil is all I probably need. So then that will make this shaft a bit too long, which is perfect because at the moment it's right up inside that little groove there. So that would mean I could trim off the motor shaft there and get the motor sunk closer to this gear by about 1.5 mil, hopefully. Then once I've done that, I'm going to make a little brass cradle that holds the bearings on the axle and also the motor. Now obviously I can't really use those screw holes there. I could, but it's not really worth the trouble. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a pair of flaps that come down the side to hold the axle and a pair of flaps up the side of the motor, which will just gently contour to the sides on here. Then I'll scuff up the motor can and I'll actually solder the motor to the actual motor mount. So that sounds a bit brutal and it's not something I've ever done before, but if you look on this patch here and also previously in this video, you can see that they had a great big capacitor, not a capacitor, sorry, a suppressor soldered to the can, and quite a large lump of solder anyway. So soldering to the motor is no big deal. So I just polish up the motor, solder it in. That means then I can get the motor into its little cradle, holding the axle, super confined. I won't have to use these tiny little screw holes which aren't threaded anyway, and that will hold it really securely. Then I'm going to use the Carrera axle as well because it fits the gear obviously, but when I pulled these wheels off the original axle, and they were indeed very, very, very barbed. This axle's too small anyway, so I can't really use that axle. It's too small, but I can definitely use the Carrera axle. So also I caught the boss as I was taking it all out, which didn't really matter because I didn't really want to use the boss anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this boss completely. I'm going to make a brass insert that fits inside that wheel with the boss on it, which is a really nice fit on the axle. So the wheels will be able to go back onto these axles via a brass boss and a little M2 screw as well. So I'll be able to screw the wheels on. So hopefully by the end of this segment, I should have a motor in a brass cradle with its axles with some custom bearings made, and these wheels on the Carrera axle all in situ ready to drop inside the bike. And then at that point, if I do need to trim a little bit more, then I know my exact length of what I'm dealing with, and I don't have to be digging around at this body any more than I have to, because I'll have something to register to it with this all complete in one little motor unit. So with all that said, let's try and move that pinion up and get this little motor pod made. Okay, progress has been made. We now have something that looks very similar to a gearbox. And all we need to do now is fold up the wires and pop it inside the bike, and we'll have something that looks like motive power. So the whole thing goes in just like that, clips in and fits exactly the same as the original wheels ever did. And it's all in there, all looking pretty. So if we put some power to the wires, we should get a running engine. And we do. So all that's left to do now, drill a couple of holes in the front here so that we can thread the wires out through the front of this bulkhead. Put some lead in this little triangular space here, and I make a nice brass cover plate to cover this all over, and the whole drivetrain is in, and then we can move on to the front guide. And there we are. That's the motor pod all completely finished, ready to go into the bike. We've got a very nice little underbelly made from brass to clean up the underside. And we got a nice chunk of lead to go in the triangular space in front of the motor. So the way this works is we just pop the motor straight into the motorbike, making sure that that wire there doesn't poke out the side so the motor can bed in nice and tight. And then these wires simply poke through the bulkhead in the front of the bike. Just like that, making sure they're nice and tight to the front of the bulkhead. And then your lead can simply slide into the space that's left, just like that. And then the motor plate goes into that little hole there, clips into the back behind, and then you just fit it in with this nice little screw, and that's the back end basically completely finished. And there you go, all done, all looking very neat and ready to go. So if we put power to the bike now, we can see that it runs. Okay, so with that all done on the back end, and we got our wires now for our guide, it's now time to think about fitting the guide onto the front wheel. Okay, so it's now time to fit the guides. Now obviously being a motorbike, there's a few problems that we've got to circumnavigate, not least of which is this rotating front wheel. So what I'm going to do, and I'll put a load of glue inside that bearing and lock up that wheel, and then I shall drill a hole through the tyre, through the wheel, and pop it out on the inside of that rim. Then what I should do is I should make a brass tube from this Revo slot deep guide, and that brass tube will go over the post flush with the top of that post. Then I should make like a nail in brass that will just push into the top of the guide, because I don't have anywhere to put a screw. So a little bit of PVA on the post of the nail, brass nail, and I shall pop it in, and that will lock the tube in place. So now you'll have a rotating tube all held in place on the guide, and with the hole drilled in the wheel and the tyre, that should be able to push up with a friction fit and stay in position good enough for what we need it to do. Next, what I should do is chop off the tops of these posts and have the wire coming underneath up through the remaining hole there and up over the top, and then I shall use one of these brass rivets to pin the braid down to the guide, and I shall pin it over on the underside, and then I can use the tops of those pins to solder the actual wires to. That means then that I should, in theory, have a rotating guide off the front wheel that will actually work really, really well. And being a deep wood guide, it should give the bike quite a lot of stability, because this bike is going to be fairly unstable, I should imagine, and this extra deep guide will probably give it all the stability that it needs. So let's hit the lathe, let's get this piece of brass turned into a tube, and then we can start thinking about getting this guide onto the front of that wheel. There we are, that's the brakes all fitted to the bike, ready for action. Now as you can see, it self-centers very well. So all I've actually done, as I said, is I've chopped off the posts on the front of that guide and I've poked the braid through the slot, and then I've used the soldered wire as like a stop bar to stop the braid from falling out the bottom of the guide. Now, will it hold up in a 24-hour slot car race? I doubt it. Is it good enough for our fun bike though? I suspect it probably is. Now, as you can see, there's a little bit of a loop around the bottom of the tyre there. It's a little bit intrusive, but it's not too bad. I probably could have routed it through this gap here and hidden it amongst the tyre, but it's fine. It's a fun bike. Who cares? But the most important thing is, when you put it on the track, it runs. So the bike is basically finished. All we've got to do now is turn our attentions to Princess Peach. Now, the problem with Princess Peach is that when she's sat on her bike, according to the image, she's very, very far forward. It's a bit like when you're going down a hill on the push bike and you're having a rest and you stand up on the pegs and you lean forward. It's not the most dynamic of positions. So I've had a bit of a mess around with her, and I've found that if you just cut a little bit more of her hip, you can actually get the range of her leg a hell of a lot more dynamic than it is as standard. Because there's standard, and there's what you can get when you chop a little bit more at the hip. And also, the back of her head doesn't really go up far enough, because I want her really tucked up behind the visor, and I want her looking absolutely forwards. I don't want her looking at the ground. I want her looking forward. So I think what I might have to do is just nibble away a little bit of the hair here, so that I can bang the hair up a little bit more, and then bend her head up forwards, so she's got a really hunkered down look on the bike. So let's have a go. Let's start chopping up her hips and bits and bobs, and then we'll get her on the bike, and then she can hit the track. And there we are. That's the completion of my Princess Peach pull back and go toy into a fully fledged slot bike. I've really enjoyed doing this little project, and I think she goes pretty well as well for what she is, and I hope you've enjoyed watching me do it. But the real important message of this video is thank you all so much for all your subscriptions and all your support and all the comments below for this whole year that's just gone by. It's been hugely appreciated, and I thank you very much. And rest assured, I've got a whole load of projects on my shelves all ready to go for next year, so we've got plenty of content to come. So have an absolutely fantastic Christmas and a happy new year, and thank you to you all again. So from me, Swift Slots, for Christmas Day, thank you very much, and have a great new year and a happy Christmas. See ya! Can I take this wig off now? It's really itchy. Are we done? Ah, good.